I want to share with you. Indeed, strange things do happen in this world. The message reads like this. Hello, Brother Nashi, how are you? Can you please post my story as hidden identity? I have my own story that I want to share with you. I am a man who has lost an entire generation. Expect for my son and my 2 daughters. As for my son, him being alive, it is because when I die, those demons that I had a contract with, they need a bloodline to always follow, because this cannot end with me. Even though some of my assets, I was told that they will perish the day that I will die. I will leave nothing behind, but the covenant will always be there following my bloodline. I don't know for how many generations. When my story started, I was just a young entrepreneur who was a loving husband and a father of 6 kids, but I never knew how far these rituals that I did will take me. Me being an entrepreneur in my country was really challenging, because everyone in Lagos is more like a hustler and everyone had the same desire to become rich, yet the opportunities were quite limited, even though I was struggling. But as for my family and my mother and my sister and their child who were back in the village, they were not suffering, because I was able to put food on the table. But the desire to succeed made me to view myself as an ultra poor man. But according to Nigerian standards, I was doing okay. Back in those days, I started with one video shop. I used to rent out DVDs and selling hi-fi systems, and I later started selling smartphones when they came into the market. That was when I started experiencing a period of low profitability. So, as to keep my business afloat, I had to lay off some of my workers, and my sister, whom I had left in the village to take care of our mother, had to come to the city so as to assist me in one of the shops, whilst my wife was in charge of the other shop. With some of these cost-cutting measures, for a little while, my business did okay, but it still had a very stressful time for me, since I was like the breadwinner in my family. And in my extended family, I was the breadwinner. I had some of my cousin brothers who were stuck in the village. So regularly, what they would do is that they would want me to assist them. And I knew that if any of my extended family members would have came to me, it would be because I was their last hope. And if I failed to help them, then it meant starvation for them. So with all of these things that were happening to me, I then ended up doing some illegal business ventures. It started very small until it became like a very big operation, like the pickpocketers that used to steal from people in town would come after they had stolen handbags that contained cell phones or whatever. They will bring whatever that they would have stolen in town back to my shop, but mostly they will bring those smartphones into my shop. Back in those days, we used to change the phone covers, and the phone would seem to be a brand new phone. Those were the days when Nokia was quite a dominant force in the market. So what would happen is that a thief would bring a stolen phone to any of my shop. Then one of my guy will change everything on the phone, and the phone will be sold as good as a used phone. Some people would even come and buy their own stolen cell phones without them ever noticing that they were buying the same phone that had been stolen from them. Occasionally, we would receive a shipment. This shipment that we would receive, it would have been from overseas through a connection that I had gotten of people that used to traffic those stolen smartphones. I had gotten this connection and my business was booming. Then unfortunately, one of my cousin brother, whom I had made to be one who handles these shipments, then got arrested. and the police was forever on my back. When he was in prison, I needed someone to help my cousin brother to get out of prison before he could rat me out. So what we did then was that my wife knew of this other priestess who mixed church and African herbs to cure her clients. So me and my wife, we rushed there to my wife's village through the night, and we had our case thrown out of court for lack of evidence. But after my cousin brother had been released from prison, there was so much infighting in the family because my cousin brother blamed me for giving him a criminal record, and he was someone who was a university graduate, even though he had not yet managed to secure any kind of employment. He was saying that I had tainted his CV because wherever now he was looking for work, he had to include that part that he had a criminal record on his CV, and he was now unable to get accepted for some government work opportunities that he had previously applied for before I had asked him to hustle for me so that he can be the one who was in charge of some of those shipments of the smartphones that would have been stolen from abroad being brought into Nigeria. Then he got arrested. As for me, I then started looking for ways that I could protect myself from all those threats. You know, in a family, when there is so much infighting, you do not know who is going to cast some spells on you. So I started going around looking for any form of protection because threats that were forever coming from some of my uncles were not good threats. I had a secret consultation with this other man who was a herbalist, but that man just swindled me all of my money. That was when I remembered that my wife had once taken me back to her village where we had the consultation with that priestess who had helped me when my cousin brother was in prison, and like magic her charms had worked on the judge because the judge had said that there was no evidence as to why my cousin brother had been held so long just in remand. So I went and I visited that priestess without the knowledge of my wife. When I arrived and after we had a secret consultation, then she told me that I had to bring my last born, who is my son, so that he can hold some of the items that we were supposed to use for the ritual ceremony. Since as for her, she could not hold those items and she was forbidden to do so by her shrine.
Devotion by Dolce & Gabbana, a new fragrance for her.
Running a business can feel like climbing a mountain. It's actually a volcano. Xero accounting software can help keep your business finances running smoothly. Soon, climbing up that mountain will feel more like riding down one on a really cool bike that can time travel.
To get ready for Making Tax Digital VAT returns, search Xero with an X.
Who was in need of those charms, so there was no way that I was allowed to touch any of the ritualistic items that we were supposed to use. So she didn't give me any help at that time when I had gone and visited her. I went back to the city. Then I traveled back after some time when I had gotten the opportunity. When my wife was not around, that was when I took my son. I then went with my son to that priestess's shrine, and when we went there, we did the rituals that were going to protect me and my businesses, because one of my uncles had cursed me and said that I will lose all of my businesses, and he didn't want me to lose my businesses only. He said that when I had lost all of my businesses that I had in Lagos, he wanted me to return back to the village as a poor boy, so much poor that I'll end up begging for a plate of food from his household. This is what he had said. So me, with the fear that I was going to be bewitched by my uncle, I then chose to do it first before anyone from my extended family could send a spiritual attack on me or on my family or on any of my businesses that I had worked so hard for them to be so successful like they were at that time. There was too much jealousy in the family. So when we arrived there, I was then taken into a dark room with my son. He was following behind me. That was where we spent the night locked up in that dark room. That room, Brother Nashi, it had no security whatsoever. It didn't have a door. It didn't have any window. But the strange part was that there was a full moon at the time when I had gone and visited that priestess. But what troubled me was that even though there was a full moon, but there was so much darkness in that room, as if there was someone that was pumping darkness into that room, because the light that was coming from the moon could not even get into that room. You could actually see that there was a great divide from the light that was coming from that moon that was so clear in the sky. And at the doorstep of that room in which we were locked up in throughout the night, all night long, I struggled to sleep because out of fear of being bitten by something very poisonous, I found it so difficult to fall asleep. And since I had been told that some unnatural things might happen to us throughout the night, so I kept on waiting in anticipation. Like if someone tells you that such and such a thing will happen to you, then you can't fall asleep because you keep on waiting for that thing that is supposed to happen to you. So the anticipation of that spiritual mystery that was going to happen to me and my son kept me from falling asleep throughout the night. That was when I started feeling something that was crawling all over my skin. This was after many hours when we had been locked in that dark room. So we had been told that if anything was going to happen, something that will be spiritual, if it happens, we were not supposed to scream because this was part of the ritual ceremony. So when this thing started happening, then my son woke up, and when he woke up, he started complaining, and he was telling me that it was as if there was something that was crawling all over his body. To me, he said, "Father, I think that maybe there is a spider that is crawling all over my body." And he wanted to scream because that thing kept on moving all over his body because he could not see it and he could not touch it because he kept on touching himself all over his body at the place where he thought that the spider was crawling all over his skin. When he wanted to scream, what I did, my brother, is that I held his mouth shut because that priestess had told me that if we were going to scream, something bad was going to happen to me and my son, and the ritual ceremony was not going to be successful. As a father who wanted to provide for his family and who wanted to protect his business interests, I then got hold of my son and I pressed my hands around his mouth so that he cannot scream out loud, even though I was very afraid of everything that was happening in that dark room. When the morning came, my son was given a white chicken, which he was.
Welcome to Good Money Guide, Stocks in Your Stockings. This Christmas, we're giving one person the chance to win a £500 contract.
Then instructed to slaughter, and the way that he was supposed to slaughter it, he was supposed to slaughter that chicken whilst he was holding the head of the chicken as if he was suffocating that chicken, and he was supposed to cut it not from the front of its neck but from the back of its neck. As to why he was given this instruction, I do not even know. After that white chicken had been given to him, I was then given an instruction that I had to kneel down in front of my son. After I had knelt down, then a circle of stones was made so that me and my son, we were both standing in the middle of that circle that was made out of stones. Then he was instructed to sprinkle the blood of that chicken after he had slaughtered it on my head. I was then given a very small tree branch, and I was told that I had to keep that branch in a very safe place at all the times. After that, I then paid the money, which was quite a large sum of money that was required for these charms that were meant to defend me and my businesses from my uncle and some of my jealous relatives. After this ceremony had been performed on me and my son, we then returned back home. I had been given a bottle of something that looked like pure water, and just before we had arrived back home, I was supposed to make my son drink all the contents that were inside that bottle of pure water that had been given to me. So along the way, even though my son had complained of severe heat that was making him to be so thirsty and hunger because we had not eaten ever since we had left Lagos to go and perform this ritual ceremony, and as we were traveling back to Lagos, I had avoided buying my son anything that was going to quench his thirst. But what I did instead was that I had bought a large packet of chips that were so salty so as to make him more thirsty. And just when we were close to home, we were about 30-minute drive from home, I then offered my son that same bottle that had some fluids that looked like pure water inside, and he finished it all. I can say that from that day, that was when my son became very different. Now my son was no longer that boy who was always troublesome like what kids are supposed to be.
7 well-known faces are going to find out if Prism works.
I can use Remitly to send dollars, pesos, rupees, and more to my loved ones around the world. Download Remitly today.
Look at me. Look at me.
When they are still growing up, even his mother began to notice that there was a sudden change in his character. It was like someone had stolen his mind and he was someone with low IQ. And us taking him to school was just like throwing money into the river. My sister was the one whom I silenced first after she had seen some of the spiritual beings that she was not supposed to see. Because one day my sister called me, then she said, "Brother, can you rush to the shop right now because it is an emergency?" So I went there without ever telling my wife. When I arrived at my other shop where my sister was assisting me, she then took me into the shop and she closed the shop behind me. Then she said, "Brother, come here. There is something strange that I want to show you." So she then proceeded with opening the cash register. And inside that cash register, there was a dead snake. From where that snake had came from, she didn't even know. So she suspected that the snake might have been sent by one of our uncles, since he had been heard saying that he wanted to make sure that poverty was going to humble me. But I knew where this snake had came from because I had seen such a snake in my dream, but I had seen that snake coming out of that priestess's shrine. Anyway, to my sister, I didn't reveal this dream that I had, but I told her to close the shop for the rest of the day, and she was staying at the back of that same shop. I then went to visit that priestess and I told all that my sister and I had seen and the dream that I had. That was when she told me that my sister was now my number one enemy because she was the one who had blocked my blessing, because the snake meant me no harm. What this snake wanted to do was that it had came to assist me straight out of her shrine so that it can help me to get more customers, and it wanted to give me more money because more customers will be driven to my shop. Even if someone will be passing through my shop, the moment that he would look into my shop, something spiritual will drag them into my shop, so much that by the time that they would have bought something from my shop, they'll keep on asking themselves as to why they had gotten into my shop in the first place. But my sister, she was the one who had stopped this blessing upon falling into my life. This snake was a spiritual being that no nobody was supposed to see. So when she saw that snake, the snake then died, and my sister's blood was needed so as to avenge this snake's death. That was how the killing and the sacrifices that started happening in my family began. Each and every time it was one sacrifice after the other, and each and every sacrifice was said to be the last sacrifice that I had to perform, and everything will be okay. Before I could even realize what was going on in my life, my mother's body was lying in the mortuary, and that same snake was sucking up her body fluids and blood. All these things, when they happened, I could see it in real time. Each and every time that this snake could kill any of my relatives, then the snake would grow much bigger because it would feed itself on the human body fluids after the person would have died, then the blood. When one of my last uncle that was remaining passed away, the snake then revealed itself to me as a man who could walk on his own 2 feet. And when that man came to me one day, whilst I was just sitting in my office, the man told me that he was the one who had been responsible of taking care of my family and protecting me against my enemies, and he had came for his own payback. What he wanted was not blood from me anymore. He wanted a wife. So this same snake had chosen 2 of my daughters to be its wives, and it had chosen my son to be the one to further my bloodline. I then forced my son to have children. When I started forcing my son to have children, he was at the age of 14. Now he is turning 27, and by the age of 27, he has 8 kids, and him being, I cannot say mentally unstable, him being slow like in his thinking, he does not even know that he has kids of his own. So what I do, Brother Nash, is that I try as much as I can to take care of these kids that I forced my child to have. I try as much as I can to look after my grandchildren, but it hurts me to know what awaits for them in the future. If only God could give me some powers, if I had the powers to cancel this covenant that I did with that priestess, I will do so. But I am in the same situation that my son, my grandchildren, and my daughters are in. We are both living under the control of this demonic force that seems to be so strong. And as for me, there is no more sacrifice that is required on my side, because what more can I offer? My bloodline is already gone. So even if this demonic entity asks me to sacrifice anything, what do I have to sacrifice apart from my own soul? As for my soul, I think that my soul is just worthless to this demonic entity, because whenever it reveals itself to me, it seems as if I am already doomed in this world and in the next world that I am going to find myself living in after I have died. I have tried, Brother Nashi, to look for ways to go and dump these ritualistic items that were given to me, but there is no one who is willing to accept these ritualistic items. I have approached several herbalists, and most of them, they say that they do not want to be in conflict with the woman whom I had a consultation with. They said that they do not want a war between their shrine and that priestess's shrine. So I am stuck. I have finished off an entire generation with all the sacrifices that I did, including my mother, and as if it is not enough, I then proceeded with cursing the very next generation. By the time that my mother fell ill, I had already been shown that one of my cousin sister, the one that I loved the most amongst all of my relatives on the extended side of our family, she was going to give me a lot of troubles at the time that my mother was going to be lying in the mortuary, because there were some rituals that I was supposed to perform, even though I was not supposed to perform these rituals in that same mortuary. I was going to perform these rituals at home, whilst my mother's body will be lying in the mortuary. So I was told that I was not allowed to let that beloved cousin sister of mine to live any longer, because she was quite a dreamer, and most of the things that she would dream about will end up happening in reality. So eventually she was going to see that I was a ritualist. For a moment, when my mother had passed away, she was woken up from the dead, and like a hunting dog, she was then unleashed by that same demonic force upon my cousin sister's life. And what breaks my heart, after the passing away of my mother and after we had buried her, we lived for something like 2 years. Then my sister, that same beloved cousin sister of mine, she fell ill, and by the time that I visited her, when she lay upon her deathbed in the hospital, she proceeded and cursed God, and she died a few moments later. The hope that she once had in God had been taken away, and I had been shown that my beloved cousin sister was going to see that my mother's corpse was already decaying, because the ritual that I was about to perform when my mother's dead body was still lying in the mortuary, and the way that my mother's dead body will decay, it will happen in an unnatural way. So this beloved cousin sister of mine, who was a dreamer, when she would have gone to the mortuary so as to witness that indeed this body once belonged to my mother, she was going to see that it was not a normal thing that a corpse can start decomposing whilst it was still in the mortuary. And if she was going to see all of this unnatural thing that was happening on my mother's dead body, then she would alert the whole family. So I then took that preemptive approach. Then she fell ill even before the burial of my mother. To her, when she fell ill, this was like a normal fever that had affected her, but I had already signed off her death certificate.